All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Erin.
And I'm Ann.
And today we're going to talk to you about content marketing in healthcare. Let's go ahead and get started. Many of you answered a short survey in the beginning of the webinar registration. And if there's one thing we've learned during the years is that if you ask 20 people what content marketing is, you'll probably get 20 different answers. And that's why we wanted to see where you're coming from as you join us today. And we wanted to share with you a definition of content marketing. So we're jumping into today's discussion with some baseline approaches.
So if you've been watching some previous webinars, hearing us talk about content marketing for a while, you've probably seen us use this definition from the Content Marketing Institute before. They say content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience, and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. And I think a couple of you actually submitted this in your comments in that pre-webinar survey. And we like this definition a lot, but it's pretty broad. And we wanted to focus in a little bit more on what we're specifically talking about when we talk about content marketing with healthcare and our digital properties. So this definition from Lexico, which is an online dictionary that's a collaboration between dictionary.com and Oxford University Press, adds some emphasis on first that online component of content marketing, which is what we are focusing on today in our discussion. But it also talks about two things that content marketing does not have, and that is explicit branding in your content. And the other thing is that it doesn't expect immediate conversions. And these two things really separate what we're talking about when we talk about content marketing today from one, your foundational or your core content, like a service line page that explains why someone should come to your healthcare system and what treatments they should get when they're at that moment of decision making for care. And it also separates content marketing from news releases, because we know news releases are generally intended to really promote your organization, get an immediate reaction from the media. So it's a little bit different animal than what we're talking about today. So let's blend those two definitions together and move forward with this definition here, which is content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and sharing valuable, relevant, and consistent digital content that doesn't explicitly promote a brand, but is intended to stimulate the interest of a clearly defined audience in its products or services.
And as an industry, healthcare marketing is devoting a lot of time and energy to content marketing. In fact, according to a recent industry survey, nearly 8 in 10 healthcare marketers, around 83%, are using content marketing and investing actively in it. And in our 2019 Geometric Healthcare Digital Marketing Trends Survey, which some of you may have participated in, a lot of our participants indicated that content marketing is one of the top 4 areas they're hoping to grow in staff, resources, and investments. And note that content development and video production also make the top 5, which play very closely into content marketing initiatives.
And that interest really isn't too surprising. Content marketing addresses 2 key issues for healthcare marketers. First, nurturing health consumers through long, slow journeys. And second, building awareness and preference ahead of those quick decisions that happen at the moment someone needs treatment. Content marketing is especially helpful for organizations who want to build content around wellness, prevention, and healthy lifestyles. We hear a lot from the organizations we work with around needing to support population health initiatives. And that ties in really well with content marketing, because the content that we use in content marketing, and you'll see this as we talk over the next half hour, 40 minutes, it often helps people in your community adopt healthier behaviors and evidence-based health prevention strategies.
But despite all that interest and all that investment to drive and add more resources to content marketing, an industry survey also found that only 36% of healthcare organizations say that their content marketing efforts are very effective. But why is that? Because the same survey tells us only a third of healthcare marketers have a documented content marketing strategy. And this is really important because pushing out content in the world is a task on its own, but knowing what topics and audiences and keywords to target and where to share it and how to measure its impact is all part of strategy. And it's a lot of work for someone to do, but it's essential to content marketing's overall success.
So let's talk a little bit more about that overall strategy. Your content marketing strategy should always start with your overall content strategy. And that's because your content marketing is just one piece, one element of your plan to get the right content to the right people in the right place at the right time. So a complete content marketing strategy includes your why. What goals are you trying to accomplish? Know the purpose of your content marketing efforts and understand how they tie into your organization's marketing communication goals and brand strategy. You'll use that why to help figure out how you're going to measure results, to figure out the effectiveness of your content marketing so you can make adjustments moving forward. And Erin's going to talk more about this towards the end of our webinar today. Your marketing strategy should always include a who you're trying to reach. Your strategy will be more effective if you can identify specific audiences. And remember that just because you serve everyone in your community doesn't mean you should or probably can appeal to everyone with your content marketing. In your strategy, outline what you can do to provide unique value. Many of you told us that this is a challenge for your organization when it comes to content marketing. So as you're working on your strategy, be intentional about defining what makes your content and your marketing different from anyone else's by documenting those differentiators in your strategy and making sure everyone on your team understands those and works those in as they're creating and planning content. Your strategy also includes plans for how you're going to plan and actually carry out your work. That helps make your editorial process as efficient as possible to save you time and keep everyone on the same page, keep things consistent. And finally, your strategy should include where you're sharing and promoting your content based on everything else that you've decided with your strategy for who your audiences are, who you're trying to reach. Now, it's ideal to create your content marketing strategy before you build your content marketing plan or start creating stories, but we all know it doesn't always happen that way. We don't always have time to build out all this robust information before we start. And that's okay. You may be at a different point with each of these bullet points on this list. And if you've already started content marketing without spending time on each of these elements, we'd say that just means you have some room to grow and a clear path forward to improve your work and your results in one of these areas. I really like this quote from a social psychologist at Harvard. She says, "There's always a step small enough from where we are to get us to where we want to be. If we take that small step, there's always another we can take, and eventually a goal thought to be too far out of reach becomes achievable." So if that list or anything we're talking about today seems overwhelming, just remember that good content marketing can start small, and you can take small steps in each of these areas to grow, evolve, and mature your approach as you go down the road of content marketing. And your team may have different levels of maturity for each of the elements of content marketing strategy that we've outlined. So we've put together this maturity model. I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples. There's a lot of information on these slides, so you'll get a copy after this webinar if you want to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about it more later. So for example, your team's planning and workflow. You may have a team that's already dedicated to content marketing. You've got a consistent process. People are churning out the content, producing and delivering it on a regular schedule. That would put your team in the advanced category of that planning and workflow area of content marketing. But it's possible that this same team, while they've got this planning and workflow down, maybe you haven't quite figured out the connection between your MarCom goals and your key performance indicators. Or maybe you're not really tracking them consistently or acting on that data regularly yet. And maybe the same team hasn't quite devoted time to defining and researching specific audiences. So when it comes to audience research and insights, they're still in that kind of fledgling or beginner category. So you can see one team could fall into different levels for each of these elements that we're talking about today. And these three things are actually three of the things that we're really going to focus on as we move forward to talk about strategies that you can take to be more more user-centered with your content marketing.
So Anne just touched on that with that marketing maturity model that we showed. And in our approach at Geometric, we really look at 6 5 or 6 spokes of content marketing. So the first is research and insights, and that's really understanding your audience through market research, personas, and journey maps, which Anne's about to talk about here in a second. The second is content marketing strategy. So content marketing is part of your overall content strategy, but the strategy of your content marketing is its own channel, setting a documented approach that intertwines your marketing and organizational goals to impact your audience and bottom line. The third is content development, creating all the stuff that makes up your content marketing efforts, all the listicles and infographics or podcasts and videos, all those things that you push out into the world. The fourth is publishing and distributing. This is mostly across your preferred channels like social media or email marketing. And last is analysis and optimization, tracking and measuring your key performance indicators and your marketing success, a piece that's easily forgotten but totally integral to a content marketing strategy. And today we're going to focus on these 3 areas: research and insights, strategy, and analysis.
Okay, so let's jump into that first one, which is understanding your audience. Now, many of us look to Cleveland Clinic's Health Essentials as an example of how to do really great content marketing. That 7-year-old blog reaches more than 5 million visitors a month. They're well known for having quality content and using data to drive their decisions around content. But they've told us that all of that really starts with understanding customers and potential customers, doing some research to understand what their day-to-day lives are like, what they care about when they're not thinking about medical care, what problems they have, and how we can help solve those problems and fit into their lives as that go-to resource. So knowing your audience is important because content marketing really holds no purpose if you don't know who you're creating it for. We want to know not just who our audience is. We don't just want a broad definition like we're trying to reach patients, but we want to know things like what daily activities are important to them. What do they value? What are their goals? What problems or concerns or uncertainties do they face? Where do they go for information and what formats do they prefer? And since we're talking about healthcare, we probably want to know some healthcare specific information about our audience too. So for example, what is their level of health literacy? And that means not just how well are they able to read the information on our site, but how likely are they to understand it and be able to apply it moving forward? Or what type of health insurance do they have? We know that someone's health insurance plan can really affect the decisions that they're going to make about where and when they pursue care. So one tool that can help you better understand and craft content for a specific audience that can answer these questions and put them down on paper for you and your team to reference is a persona. A persona is a representation of your ideal customer based on market research and real data about your existing customers. Now, personas are helpful resources as you make decisions about content, design, and features across all your marketing efforts. But today we're going to focus on how you can use them in content marketing. So your persona might look a little something like this. This is a very slimmed down example of a persona, but we wanted to have something concrete to walk through with you on our webinar today. This visual was created with a tool from HubSpot called Make My Persona that allows you to plug in the information that you've gathered through your research and create this nice visual that your team can refer to as you're working on content. You can see in this sample persona that it's addressing many of the questions that we just talked about. You can see it's got a space for talking about this persona's goals or objectives, some of her challenges, and some of her interests. That's important because when we understand all those things, that really helps us create better content for that particular person. So for example, when we understand what daily activities are important to that persona, we can better create that connection and grow it over time. When we understand their values and their goals, we can create content that helps them achieve those goals. And when we understand their problems, we can help address their concerns, clear up any misunderstandings or uncertainties, or help solve problems. And when we understand where they go for information and what types of formats they prefer, we're better able to provide information in the format and the place that they prefer. So for example, we know that Millennial Megan's main goal is to keep herself and her family healthy. But we also have learned that she's not very familiar with medical terms. She's rather inexperienced with the healthcare industry. She hasn't spent much time navigating it. So she's not familiar with the language that we might use every day as healthcare marketers. We also know that she doesn't have a lot of free time. So when we take all this information together, it helps us gain insight into the types of content that she might be interested in and how we want to present it. So for example, if she's unfamiliar with medical terms, we know that as we create content marketing, we need to use plain language and we need to explain any jargon or any healthcare industry terms to her. Because we know she has little free time, this is probably not the right audience for a 1,500-word essay, a really long form article. We probably want to put things together that are short, quick hit articles or infographics that she can look at, get some valuable information, and go on with all the other things that she has to do in her busy life. As we learn about her hobbies or her interests, we also see that she's interested in running. So this leads into our next tool. As a runner, there's a good chance that she's going to need healthcare at some point. There's a lot of variance in statistics out there around runners and running injuries, but one source said that up to 70% of runners develop overuse injuries each year. Now we know that in a typical patient journey, and in our typical marketing efforts, we focus almost completely on the moment of decision. So most of the content on our site, our foundational content around service lines, locations, doctors, really focuses on that moment when a person is at the end of considering their care options and deciding to make an appointment. According to Forbes, in a content-driven world where self-education has largely become the norm, it's important to understand how to engage with prospects to drive them toward your solutions. So how do we talk to them before that overuse injury happens? It's really up to marketing, and especially content marketing, to improve that nurturing process. And one of the biggest ways to build trust and nurture those relationships is by being a reliable source of information over time throughout the entire patient journey. So as we think about the entire patient journey and we think about Millennial Megan, our persona here, that persona really outlined how she is in her everyday life, that generally healthy phase. But at some point there's a trigger event. She has some knee pain. She does some research to consider her care options and try and decide, can she treat this at home? Does she need to go see a doctor? What are her options? She makes an appointment, receives care, and then has some ongoing health management. She probably wants to try and prevent this injury from happening again. She's probably more aware of that preventative health need. So knowing that, content marketing is an opportunity to really expand the focus of the information that we're sharing with consumers in our area. When we start thinking about what people need when they're in, say, the generally healthy phase or the ongoing health management phase, we have an opportunity to present a lot broader spectrum of information to them, such as illness and injury prevention content or helping them navigate the healthcare system. But we want to think carefully about how that fits in based on the stage that our users are at, and patient journey mapping really helps with that. It helps us create and deliver content that meets people's needs where they're at in their journey. And that helps us build those relationships that hopefully lead to them choosing you for care when they get to that make an appointment phase. So for each stage, consider, what does the patient do? Where and how do they interact with your organization? What are the patient's top priorities and goals? We saw some top priorities and goals from Millennial Megan in her generally healthy phase, but how does that change once she has a trigger event or once she's into that ongoing health management phase? What is the patient's emotional state? At each of these phases, what causes them to feel negative things like stress or annoyance? And when are they feeling more optimistic or hopeful? This helps us understand the tone that we're going to take as we're moving forward with our content. And how can you connect with patients to help them accomplish their goals and support a positive experience with your organization? Now, like personas, journey maps can help you make patient-centric decisions about content, design, and features across your entire marketing efforts. The insight we gain around the stages before and after a person seeks care is extremely valuable in helping us develop content that resonates with consumers and meets their needs in specific moments of their lives. But where does all that information on the patient journey map come from? We look at information from stakeholders or subject matter experts who help us better understand what they're hearing from the people that they're working with in your healthcare system. We look at consumer data, including feedback from those patient surveys that you're likely sending out after patients come and have a visit with one of your providers. We can conduct patient and family interviews to help gain more insight. We look at healthcare industry research and website user behavior. We can put all these together to put them into a patient journey map. Now, I know this is a lot of information on the screen, so I'm going to cut it down to a narrow slice. But let's say we know that we need to support and grow our orthopedics and sports medicine services. So here's a sample slimmed down patient journey map for that service line and the persona that we shared earlier. So let's focus in on one stage of this journey. We know that when this persona is generally healthy, she likes to run, she likes to keep up on fitness news, but she has goals to train for a race and improve her fitness level. So that means we have some opportunities to connect with her around fitness and wellness related content, maybe even some local running resources. Those are the types of things that she's looking for at this stage of her journey. But as we move through this patient journey, we see here under trigger event, we're going to say for this patient journey, the trigger event is some knee pain. And so this persona starts researching some of those symptoms and has this goal of really figuring out what to do next about knee pain. And is probably feeling a little distressed at this point, which means we might want to take a little bit different tone with some of our content than we would at the point where they're just doing some general research about how to stay well. So we have some different opportunities here, such as content about sports injuries or self-care, and when to see a doctor versus when to treat yourself at home. So you can see in this journey map how we start matching the type of content to the patient's needs for where they are in their journey. But we want to get a little bit more specific than that when it comes to actually figuring out what the article is that we're going to write. And one great tool to help with that is keyword research. And I'm going to turn it back to Erin to talk some more about that.
So keyword research is something at Geometric, and if you joined us for other webinars, we talk about a lot. It's so important, even in all the changes and fluxes of algorithms over the years. Keyword research still very much has a purpose in our day-to-day work as marketers. Why we search. Millennial Megan, our persona that Anne has drawn up for us, is a lot like you and me. She is searching for answers to questions. She wants to find information. She wants to connect and follow her favorite brands and products. She wants to interact with valuable content. She wants to maybe make a conversion and take a needed next step. So there's lots of different reasons we go online. There's lots of different reasons we search. And really, when it comes down to it, Google and search engines are looking for content that's well written and unique and utilizes those keywords in an effective way to return searches back to people that are closest matched with their needs. So where do we start? Let's kind of throw it out there. If you have limited resources, as we saw from some of the feedback in the registrations, Google's predictive search and related searches are a great place to start. So they can use real data from real people to help categorize common searches. And though they're not geo-targeted necessarily to your audience or to your locale, it's a really good way to get a glimpse at what's trending. So Millennial Megan, for example, we know she's got some knee pain. She's getting pretty discouraged and she has a race coming up, but she doesn't really want to be sidelined just yet. She's not sure she needs to see a doctor just yet. And we know she had from her persona a high deductible health plan. We know she's on a tight budget, so she's going to see what she can learn on her own at home to take care of herself. So she goes online, she sees other related searches for knee pain running. She notices people look for running downhill with knee pain. There's some Reddit articles about that. There's some people also ask, which is kind of a Q&A return from Google. She can also see some videos and related searches on the bottom of the page. So as a healthcare marketer, again, this isn't necessarily tied directly to your locale or your geo-target. You can still get a lot of valuable information about what types of topics are trending around this type of query. And so we're going to kind of follow this lead with Megan and see where we go. You can take a next step further and use a tool called Google Trends, and I should ask for Google stock. I sing this praise all the time, but Google Trends is such a free and easy tool to use. It's available to all marketers. It takes a lot of data going back as early as the 2000s to see what trends and keywords have changed over time. So you can browse general health topics as well. And in this case, I just went ahead and put in knee pain running, just like Megan did in her Google search. And you can look up specific keywords and queries and see what's trending. So this is as of, I think, 2 days ago, I took the snapshot. We can see that people are looking at outer knee pain running, and there's been an 80% increase in trend in those blue states that are highlighted in that map there. It's trending in a lot of states, but not in others. So in this case, we don't really know where, in our persona that we built, we don't really have a geo-target for Megan. We're going to say she's in Iowa because we're Iowa girls too. But if she was in Colorado, or she was in, it looks like more like Wyoming, Montana, those areas, it's not trending quite as popular there. So those are things that you want to take into consideration. And Google Trends is a great tool to do that, to help you understand the value of that keyword in your area. Now, Google and Google Trends can do a lot of your keyword research with just a little elbow grease, but 74% of users do search online using questions, and nearly 60% of those are using voice search for the same thing. So all of those Hey Google interactions or Hey Alexa interactions you're having with your voice pods at home, that's counting toward the voice search trends that we're starting to see in the industry. So that's where a tool like Answer the Public can come in. This is another free or subscription-based tool that lets you see common questions asked around specific topics. So for this one, I just put in running, and it gave me too many to fit on the screen, as you can tell. It's really beneficial because, again, as voice search gains popularity, it's a nice way to kind of see what kind of questions are out there that you could really build some valuable articles around. As you can see, there's lots of topics around running. They kind of attach them to different formats of questions here. We've got things that are kind of tied to pain, but some of it that's more just about being a better runner and taking good care of yourself. So this is a really great tool you can use to find other topics that kind of align with Megan's more healthy habits, healthy running habits, and even stuff that she might be able to use as she's facing her injury. And based on what we learned from those tools, what if we created some topics? So for example, if Millennial Megan's in Iowa, maybe we create one for best walking trails in central Iowa. Maybe she needs to take a break, take a breather, give her knee some time to rest, and she's just going to walk it for a little bit. That's a great article to geo-target our area. But outside of that, a listicle about 5 common pains of running, whether she's healthy or whether she's experiencing pain, that might be a very soothing article to read so she knows what to expect. Ask an expert, having one of your orthopedists or one of your sports medicine doctors come in and talk or interview them about why does the outer knee hurt after running, find out what that injury means and when that's time to talk to a doctor. Maybe she's into infographics. We know she's short on time. So best leg and knee stretches for runners might be something that's really good for her to do at home, since we know she's trying to make that decision on whether or not to come and see a doctor. And again, video is another very popular method of content marketing as we see that increase of video and mobile use. So treating common knee pain at home, have a doctor walk through different ways someone can treat that pain at home might be exactly what Megan's looking for. So there's some considerations though when you're taking in keyword research, and your research is going to turn up a lot of keywords. You're going to find a lot of queries. You might be swimming in them, so to speak. So when you're choosing which ones to use, you want to keep a couple things in mind. First thing is relevance. So how relevant are those keywords to the subject matter or topic? You never want to force a keyword artificially into your content to boost SEO. It's just not worth it. You really want to keep that topic and those keywords as closely intertwined as you can. The second is search volume and frequency. How often is that term being researched? Obviously, the more search volume, the more maybe likely competition you're going to have, but likely it's going to be more popular search terms, so you have a better chance of being found or someone looking for you. User intent. So there's different ways you can look at user intent. You can look at, for example, Megan's knee pain running. That could mean that she's looking for, maybe she's preparing for knee pain that she thinks she might have. Maybe she's already got that knee pain. But what breaks it down is you start looking at some of those related queries, and you start looking at things like informational queries, which would be knee pain running, or something more commercial like best knee pain treatment. Maybe they're looking for the best anti-inflammatory drug, or maybe they're looking for the best doctor in the area. Maybe it's transactional. Maybe she's looking for knee pain appointment. She wants to see someone who can treat it. So user intent can be very easily pulled as you start looking at your keywords one by one. Looking at your competition and local results, of course, as well. You want to know kind of who's in your backyard, who are you up against, and who's talking about these kind of topics similarly to what you're trying to do. Competing with the likes of Mayo and WebMD is not probably going to be as much worth the effort, but keep an eye on those local results in competition, because those might be places where maybe your organization can fill a gap in covering that topic or category. And also, don't let high difficulty of ranking necessarily sway you from using that term. Typically, difficulty of ranking means it's how easy it is for that keyword to win, but that doesn't always mean that you should avoid it if it is difficult. If it's an actual need and you know that there's a need for your organization to address that topic, it can absolutely be something that you prioritize. And keyword research does a lot of other great things beyond helping you generate content for your content marketing. It can give you a lot of insight into how people say or spell certain things, especially when we look at longer tail queries. You can kind of see how people are putting some of those healthcare terms together. It's a really nice way too to fight for plain language in your organization, and we take that very seriously when we talk about content accessibility at Geonetric. And plain language is a way to help really meet all users, regardless of the language that they speak or regardless of what tools they're using to access the web. Plain language is easier for them to digest and understand. And so it's a really good way to help defend that in your organization. It helps also create and govern foundational website content. So as you're doing keyword research for your content marketing, you might find gaps in your actual foundational services content, for example. And this is a great place to start building up that case for why you should build out that content on your site. Of course, you can use this to evaluate the value of story ideas. If for instance, you're in one of those states where knee pain running isn't that popular, maybe it takes a back seat in a lower priority list. But it is a really great way to see what's trending in your area. See if there's places that maybe your competitors are forgetting about that you can leverage in your content marketing. If you're looking for more, check out geonetric.com/SEO. I'm trying not to, say too much because there's so much great stuff out there that has been done about this from our team. So please go out and check those resources out when you get a chance. Now, taking all that keyword research, bringing that all together, building in that persona experience, bringing in that user journey, all comes into what this thing is called an editorial calendar. And it's really this fantastic tool that's unfortunately not quite as leveraged. According to a 2019 survey by the Content Marketing Institute, 55% of marketers polled outsource content marketing activities in some capacity. That makes sense. Even as I mentioned in our pre-registration questionnaire, a lot of folks answered that resources were a big factor holding back your team from getting started on your content marketing. And that is totally understandable. It's a big chore, it's a big task. And 80% of those who answered this question for Content Marketing Institute said that they outsourced the writing of content, and 37% outsourced distribution. So resources are really tight. That can be very problematic, and it's kind of a challenge that you have to overcome. And that's where editorial calendars can really come in. And so, again, let's just pretend we've checked all the strategy boxes. We've gotten the personas written down. We've got a good idea of the journey. We've done some really strong keyword research. We've got it all. We've got some good story ideas brewing based on all of these things. But now the question comes down to who's owning this stuff. Where will it publish? Where will it live? Editorial calendars are really the way that you schedule content for production through your channels and your content marketing hub, or your social or your newsletters and so on. So it's all tied to one specific timeline. So once a story or topic is pitched, your team can sort out who's going to own it, what resources you might need, the publish date you're hoping to put it live on, and the measurement and the assessment after the publication. So editorial calendars are a place for all of that governance to live, and they're really essential for an effective content marketing. So here's an MVP calendar. An MVP around here at Geonetric, we use that as minimal viable product. It's very much a kind of a software term, but it's a really great way to think about how you can make small slices and steps, like Anne mentioned earlier, to get you toward the goal. So in an MVP editorial calendar, you might start off with just a few categories. Maybe you kind of throw out an intended publish date. Maybe you have a list of status and owner. So who owns it? What's the status? What version is it in? Where we're at with that? A title and a summary. In this case, Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month is coming up. Maybe you write about what you should know about screening for cancer. And then there's a little summary, and we have a couple of resources that we might reach out to help us write this content. There's also a CTA and a promotion. So we know that we're going to want to schedule screenings, push people to schedule screenings, and promotion, we're going to probably target Facebook, Instagram, and email marketing. So gives us an idea of kind of what to expect, where things are going, where we're hoping to send it off to after it gets published. And so that gives us something to start from. But as you take steps toward a more optimized calendar, you can do this a little bit differently. So as you go forward, you can add a couple of things like target audience, for example. Talk a little bit about who's that persona you're trying to reach. With colon cancer, a lot of times it's men and women aged 45 and up. So let's just start with that as a target audience. That's our persona. We go into targeted keywords as well, which gives us a little bit more about what keywords we saw that we were maybe going to edge up our competition on, maybe things that were opportunities for us. Track those down, because as someone's picking up this work to write or to create, they're going to want to know what keywords they need to target as they're building that metadata or that content. And last, goals and tracking. You can actually get very specific here, talking about the specific goal that you want to create. So ideally, you should be tying your goals in with your organizational goals. In this case, we're going to say we want a 15% increase in appointment requests over 3 months. That gives us a very specific timeline to work with. And to track that, we're going to use Google Tag Manager, Click to Call, and our CRM funnel to track. So that gives you a little bit more detail into your calendar, but it gets it even closer to the finish line of we have a totally integrated approach, that advanced approach to the content maturity, to give you some baseline and some solid kind of walls around what you're trying to do as a team. Now, in terms of editorial calendar tips, they typically recommend, and I say they, I mean HubSpot is a leader in content and digital marketing. They actually recommend a 3 to 4 month lead time in building your calendar. That's because it gives you time to pivot and shift if things in the organization change. So a sudden midsummer campaign could crop up out of nowhere, meaning your marketing team has to be pretty agile to turn that around quickly. So giving that shorter time span gives you a little bit more time to make those changes. You can also mine health awareness events and community interest for ideas. So use your social media profiles to ask people what's on their mind, what's concerning them. You know, obviously in today's world, we've got a lot on the news right now about the coronavirus. That is probably top of mind for a lot of people. Find out what they want to know and take that to the next step to take that to your organization, take that to your doctors, and write and talk about those topics, because that's stuff that people really want to know about, and that's going to make you a very credible and educated resource for them. And then again, meet regularly as a team. So update the status of your planned content, have a physical editorial calendar in whatever way you need it. And then as resources change or shift, or people come and go from your group, or things come down from the organizational side that you need to change, you can address them as a group and keep rowing the boat in the same direction. And that's really what's really important about editorial calendar and what it can do for you. All right, so we've checked all the boxes. Now we've checked off the editorial box, and it's time to publish and let these babies leave the nest. See how they do in the wide world, how we can distribute and track their success. The first thing is you need to know where your audience is before you publish. So as Anne mentioned with the Millennial Megan that we created, we know what kind of social network she's on. We know, she likes to text message more than phone call. She's probably on her mobile a lot. Knowing that is really important, because we're not just going to go out and create 1,500 word long academic essays for Megan when she doesn't have time. We're probably not going to hope to just put everything on desktop and not have it optimized for mobile. We want to make sure that we're reaching those audiences where they are. So for example, Pew Research did a social media fact sheet in 2018, and you can kind of see the different variances of age groups and generations on the different social platforms today. And Facebook continues to lead everyone, and knowing your target personas and where they're spending that time could influence how you share that content. So as they inevitably do, will shift in terms of social media popularity. Knowing where to target that information and that content is going to be ever more important. And so use that to help drive your editorial calendar, drive where you're going to share some of that information as you publish it. And then when it comes to tracking, use some of the free stuff that's out there. Some of those easy access measurement tools like Google Webmasters gives you Google Analytics and Search Console. You get Tag Manager so you can track engagement and conversions and things like that. That's a great way to do it. I pulled up YouTube's analytics dashboard here. A lot of the social media channels offer their own free analytic tracking to give you some updates on shares and comments and click through. And UTM tracking codes can add another layer of that. And of course, your own website gives you opportunities for specific appointment requests, email subscriptions, event registration, and tracked phone calls. So use your website tracking and website analytics as much as you can. And if you do that already, you're in good company. Respondents to our 2017 survey told us that content marketing metric they most often track is engagement, and that comes down mostly to visits, page views, downloads, clicks, and shares. And reach, like ad impressions and search engine ranking, comes in not far behind at number 2. But again, there's kind of a drop off between number 1 and 2 and number 3, which are conversions. And that's the phone calls and form submissions that really drive, dollars in the door, patients in the door, however you want to look at it. And this is hard to do, but it's really essential to defending your content marketing strategy and adding value to your stakeholder conversations about what your team is up to when it comes to content marketing. So as you're thinking about conversions, think about them in the SMART approach. And this stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And so you've probably seen these, I would say probably a lot of different industries use SMART metrics, but they're really, really great in a marketing sense when you're tracking conversion rate. So making sure that you're measuring a specific area for improvement, making sure that you're being very focused and measurable on the quantifier and indicator of progress, making sure that that goal is attainable and realistic. I think Anne mentioned, we just want to appeal to patients. That's quite a large group of people to appeal to. So what's more realistic and in reach for that? Making sure it's relevant and tied to your overarching goals, and make sure it's timely so that you know when results can be achieved and what you expect to time box around that. So in our example here, maybe you're trying to increase urgent care appointments by 10% over a quarter. Maybe you're going to track that through the Reserve My Spot call to action with your Google Tag Manager. You're going to observe the reservation system requests for those folks who are reserving that spot. You're going to apply UTM tracking codes to your social and email marketing, and you're going to review all of this at the end of the quarter and track its success and see if you've gotten that 10% return. Now, taking that 10% return goes a little bit further because you've really got to think about how you get people in your system. And this is where CRM and different types of email marketing automation can come into play. It's important to remember at any point in your patient journey that they may want to learn about a condition, they might want to take a class, they may want to subscribe to your newsletter, and they have the option to do that at any point. And so what that should do is funnel into your CRM, and that gives you some really valuable insight into the people that are asking to be involved with your organization, who need care and services from you. And so no matter what they're doing, they're telling you that they want to engage with your brand. And that's really the big takeaway here. You can use these CRM data to build those personas and those user journey maps that Anne talked about. You can use them to build more direct marketing funnels to them and to keep them engaged with your brand even after their initial class or appointment. That's a really great tool you can use and leverage if you have it available to you. But at the end of the day, each piece of your content marketing should have an audience and understand goal or value. So while metrics like engagement and click-through rates are good, knowing the true value of that person's experience, from reading a blog post to scheduling an appointment, is a true snapshot of your content marketing success. So as you're thinking about your data, think about who you're trying to target in each of those cases or those personas that you're trying to use. You should be using that to drive the meaningful content marketing that they're expecting. And at the end of the day, you really want to think too about the value of that conversion. So it could be a dollar value, it could be a percentage of an area of service that you want to increase. But once you know that value or worth at the end of the conversion, your team can build meaningful metrics and measurements that you can set as targets for each piece of content marketing you create. So from CRM to personalized reach, you can take that data that comes in, connect your CRM to, say, marketing automation platforms like HubSpot, Marketo, or Acton. You can build email marketing opportunities. You can build out phone calls and text messages to folks if they opt to be part of that. Send them direct mailers about other related services or opportunities or classes that they want to take part in, and use that for online and social paid advertising as well. And you can track all of that success within the analytics and engagement and the timely goals that you've set for yourself. But when it comes to targeting any personalized information to your consumers, please, please, please remember that healthcare is very personal. And I know we all have been patients on that side of the journey before, but make sure that your audience has the option to give you their information and how often they want to be contacted. Don't just assume because they filled out a form that they're ready to be thrown into your funnel and get, an email a day. You really want to make sure you give them that option to engage with you if you can. And likewise, if they choose to opt out, maybe they're leaving the area, maybe they don't want that marketing anymore, make sure it's easy for them to do that, and that when they do opt out, it truly does opt them out. There's been a lot of changes in the industry over the years with the European Union and how they kind of protect user data. And we're really trying to take, even though it doesn't necessarily affect every organization in the United States, there's still a lot to learn from that because people take their privacy protection very seriously. So make sure that you're keeping that in mind. When people give you their information, they're really doing you a huge favor. You're getting that real data from real people. So be respectful of that trust that they're offering to you. So that was a lot. Let's talk about what we've learned.
I think we've been talking a lot over here. Yeah. So we hope when you signed up for this webinar, you answered this question: what's your single biggest challenge when it comes to content marketing in your organization? And here's a snapshot of what we heard as of this morning. So we heard that a lot of you just don't have time. Standing out from your competitors is another big challenge. Reporting ROI and finding a budget are also obstacles. But we hope the techniques, tools, and approaches that we've shared today will help you tackle some of these challenges. So, for example, when we talked about audience insights and personas, those are things that as you gain when you choose an audience to target and you gain a deep understanding of what they need, that can really help you stand out from your competitors because you're delivering the content that audience really cares about. They know that you're the place that they can go to when they need that trusted source of information. As we talked about editorial calendars, they really support quality and consistency, as well as your budget, your time, and your skills. They help your team work effectively towards shared and understood goals, and they also help you work with outside resources. So if time is your constraint and you are working with a partner or some freelancers, that editorial calendar is really something that's going to help keep your whole team aligned and working together. Keyword research helps identify opportunities and places where you can stand out from your competitors, covering topics that they might not be considering, or maybe just taking a little bit different angle, talking about them in a different way. And setting SMART goals is a great way to help report ROI that can drive more resources and allocations to your content marketing efforts. You start small, you see good results, and you report that, and hopefully that motivates the person holding the purse strings to throw a little more budget your way so that you can just keep growing that result.
All right, so we're going to take another look at Geonetric's approach here. And the difference between the previous slide we showed earlier and this one is that we put some nice, almost recycle arrows around it, but that's really important because you'll notice that content marketing and content strategy as a whole is really cyclical. Your website is never done. It's truly a living, breathing piece of your marketing experience and your audience experience with your brand. And as digital needs and trends change, you want to keep your team informed on how to adjust. So there's always time to analyze and optimize your content, especially if it's outdated, especially if that content needs to be readdressed. Publishing is an ongoing ebb and flow with the plan that you've set out for the year. Content development happens and should be happening all the time, and your strategy and research should be ongoing, constantly understanding and reaching out to consumers, looking at that data to provide insight and delivering content that they want to engage, and then again, repeating. So this is really an ongoing process for you, just like your content strategy for your foundational content is, your content marketing should also be. All right, we're going to turn it over for some questions.
Yeah.
All right, thank you to Anne and Aaron. I know a lot of time and effort went into that deck, so a lot of great information in there. Definitely some stuff to simmer on and think about. We'll give Aaron and Anne a chance here to catch their breath, look over some questions that came in. While we did, just want to remind everybody, we have the webinar coming up next month is on pricing transparency. So if you wanted to go ahead and register for that now, you can do so by going to geonetric.com/webinars. And I think we're ready. So let's get started here with the first question. Someone's wondering, how do I plan resources and budget to put together a content marketing team?
That's a really great question. We're going to answer this. We're both going to answer this question, so get ready for two voices. So first of all, you want to think about again, that quote that's so great about starting small. If you have people in your team that are interested in this in any capacity, run a trial, run a little test, see if you can start peeling them off, maybe aim small, one article a week, one article every other week, just kind of test the waters and see what's out there first. That's a really good way to kind of integrate it in without taking away too much time and resources from other responsibilities and projects. As you're doing that, again, applying some tracking, small achievable goals, SMART goals that you can use to track the success of those pieces over a short period of time, that can at least give you a baseline for why you want to invest more heavily in content marketing and go to some of those folks who might have a little bit more control over your budget to say, hey, we're seeing some good return on this.
Yeah, and as you're doing that, take time to talk with your team and understand where their skill sets currently are and where they want to grow. We've done some great exercises with some of our clients to look at exactly that and figure out what you can do internally, what you can grow internally to help improve that job satisfaction on your team, and where there might be opportunities to partner with an outside vendor or partner with some freelancers or hire someone else to your team to fill those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good question that came next. What are some effective ways to get doctors involved with content marketing?
Ooh, that is a good question.
Well, most of the doctors I know love being able to see their name in print, right? Like they love that promotion. So when you're working with doctors, if that's what they want, if they want to get their name out there, they want to share their expertise, work with them on ways that you can do that. So maybe you want to ghostwrite an article for them. Maybe your doctor doesn't have time or the resources to sit down and really write a content marketing post that aligns with your style, but you can write it, you can put their byline on it, and then they're still getting that attention and maybe more likely to respond to you and share all that expertise and those ideas.
Yep, and as you're trying to build your content marketing experience, whether that's an editorial brand that lives within your website or a content hub of some sort, see if you can rally some doctors in your corner that want to be part of this. Oftentimes there are people in your organization that maybe don't have time, they're not interested, but there may be a section of folks who are very energized in what marketing is doing and they know the value you play in their day-to-day and bringing in new patients. So see if they can be part of that, put out a call, talk to anybody that maybe is close to your team already today, and do as exactly Ann said, see if you can ghostwrite for them. Video, I know, is a resource. It's not totally available to everyone. It's a little bit more time consuming, but Mayo Clinic does, I think they call it the Mayo Clinic Minute on Twitter, and they're great little minute-long kind of Q&As with doctors to learn about a topic. That might be a really cool way to get some video FaceTime with your doctors, take a little bit less of their time. They can be a little bit more natural. And then again, if there's a way you can integrate those pieces that they help you author into their profiles, that gives them some added promotion and some more interesting pieces for any future patients that might be looking for them.
And I'll add to that. I think if basically if you have a phone, you have a video camera, and that might be a good way to approach that with doctors too. I mean, it's a lot less threatening than walking up to them with a $20,000 red digital video camera. So yeah, let's go ahead and keep moving on here. Someone's wondering what they should do with old content marketing stories.
That's a good one. If you've been at this for a while, you're gonna get quite a buildup of content on your website, and you don't want digital clutter. You don't want old stories with outdated information popping up when they shouldn't be, or slowing things down for your users.
Yeah, 100%. That's why fun fact, I was a nursing student for a year, and after a year deciding I wanted to go into journalism, I decided I should probably sell these books back. They wouldn't take them because they're already outdated. So it happens to content marketing too. It's very easy for medical content marketing to get outdated. So I think one of the best things, kind of harkening back to analytics, is looking at kind of the data of that content marketing. So if you have some things that are popular, even though they're a couple years old, getting a little rusty, maybe it's time that you don't archive them or get rid of them, but that you actually give them a new life, maybe update them, return to it, bring that topic back up to the 2020s, as they say, and see if you can give it another life in the new decade. I think that's a really great way to start. Auditing your content is something that's always ongoing and should be happening on both your foundational site and your content marketing. So as you're finding those things and you're saying, oh, this feels like it might be a little stale, definitely bring that up, check the analytics and see if there's value there.
And if some of those old articles are still accurate, but they're not getting the traction that you want, you remember those old sitcoms used to do like clip shows and they would show like the greatest hits? You can do that with your content marketing too. You can create what we call like a curated list, where maybe you grab all the articles you've written over the past 10 years related to nutrition or running or some topic, and you create a little intro and you link out to those articles to help give them more life and help them gain traction again.
Yep, and that's a good way to do it too. For listicles, they'd say are one of the more popular formats. That's a really great way to give traction to the articles that you've put your heart and soul in, as we all do, that haven't gotten as much traction. You can give them a little bit more of a boost because they get teased in that listicle format and people can't resist the listicle.
All right, well, we're coming up on time here, so I'll just take the last couple minutes to remind everybody that we have our companion offer for today's webinar available at geonetric.com/ oh, that is not the correct link, but you can get it there too. Content-marketing-ebook. That should work. If it doesn't, send me a message, send a message to hello@geonetric.com and we will get you sorted out. So that's going to cover everything that Ann and Aaron talked about today. And just a reminder, in addition, we will also be in contact with you with the recording and the slide deck from today's presentation. And we have our pricing transparency webinar coming up next month. Touched on that already. So with that said, we'll cut everybody loose and we will see you in March. Have a good afternoon.